Tell us about this quilt, Annie.
This is one of my very favorite quilts, Baba Black Sheep. I wanted to have the little sheep frolicking in the meadows, and I quilted it using a wool batting, so I wanted them to stay kind of puffy. I didn't want them to look really flat. I used fusible thread for all the applique on here, even for the words. So I traced the words onto the fabric, stitched around it, positioned them in place, fused them on, and then I went around these. When I went around the letters and the shapes, I used King Tut because I wanted a thread that would really show up and almost look like I had done a hand buttonhole stitch with an embroidery thread. So that's what I did. I used black on all of these shapes, and I did fusible web for those. When I made the little bags, my dimensional bags that are on here, and I had to turn the hem under, I just stitched along the edge of it with the fusible thread, turned it under, and it held it in place. So that was an easy way to put a hem in. Fairly permanent though, so you need to consider that if you're thinking about putting a hem in a garment.
That's a question I want to ask you. Is Charlotte's fusible web repositionable?
I have not found it to be. I have found that once I get it in one place, it pretty much needs to stay right where I put it.
I've put the iron back on it, and then I've pulled off the shape, but there's a residue left that doesn't come off. We have actually melted nylon into the base fabric, so that's the one thing. But same with anything that's on a sheeting web. Once you've ironed that on, you really can't pull that off either.
Right. And something that to me that is the other really great benefit of this is when I did my little lambs, I did not want to have the red meadow showing through the white lamb's body. By using the fusible, I was able to trim that red fabric out behind all those, and I don't have that red layer showing through once it's quilted. Now, I loved the way these little sheep looked on here, and then I thought, how would they have looked with Texture Magic? Because I could just see a puffy little lamb here. So I tried one version, and I did it on a little bib. This is a good example of the fact that you don't want to use dark fabrics because the texture doesn't show up as well. You can see that the texture shows up a lot better on this little yellow chick than on this dark black lamb, but I still loved the extra texture that I got.
What you can't see probably on camera is that this really does have more of a 3D look. It's raised, and you really do just want to
go touch it.
You want to touch it for sure.
I have also made this bib using white and then a meadowy look behind, and that's really cute. I used Charlotte's Fusible Web thread to applique both of these bibs. And the procedure that I showed you earlier is the procedure that I used with one small difference. When I trace the shape onto the applique fabric, it would be really hard to trace it on the textured fabric.
Right.
So in that instance, I trace it on the back side, the Texture Magic side, and then I need to run my fusible thread through my needle. Usually I wind the fusible thread on the bobbin and put the monopoly on top. In this case, I want to put the fusible in my needle. I'm going to put a bigger needle in. You want a size 116 because it's a thicker thread. It needs a bigger needle to go through. And then I stitch around the shape just like I did before, but that enables the fusible thread to be on the base layer of the shape that you do. And from there on, it's exactly the same procedure as what we did before.
Yes, the fusible web does need a number 116. And we recommend a top stitch needle, and of course we recommend Superior Threads top stitch needle for any time you're using a thick thread like the fusible. That way it won't shred. If you're having shredding problems with fusible thread being run through the needle, it's because your needle is too small. And the titanium coating makes it very smooth and sharp, so it'll go through all those layers. Annie, fusible thread. I look at this, and yes, it's a thick thread. Where do you use it? Do you use it in the bobbin? Do you use it on the top?
If you're going to use it in the top, you need to put a larger size needle in, and I'm always too lazy to change my needle. But I put this on the top of my machine, and I put my bobbin on, and I wind my bobbin just like I was winding any other kind of thread. You don't have to do it by hand.
Okay.
It winds perfectly well with your machine. I wind my bobbin, I put this in the bobbin, I put my slick thread on top, and then I stitch. Now there are instances where I would run it this on the top. For instance, if I'm want to applique something with Texture Magic where it would be difficult to mark it on the top, in that case I run this through my needle so that it ends up being on the back, because I would mark
so
it there.
truthfully, you have to decide what side are you actually sticking to the base fabric.
Right.
And just make sure though, that's why we use it in the bobbin, because we have traced the shape, we're sewing around the shape, and it's easier for us to see that.